Just want to say good morning and welcome. My name is Iris. I'm with the GLI team, and we're really excited to have you all join us for another meeting of our Workforce Development and Barriers workstream within the Business Council to End Racism. Just want to quickly turn things over to our new workstream leader, but before I do so, I just want to quickly introduce Chet Kavanaugh with TKT and Associates. They are with us to help facilitate and project manage the Business Council to End Racism. And so Chet will be taking notes and helping facilitate group discussions later in today's program. Now, I'd like to introduce our new Workforce Development and Barriers Workstream leader, Devon Holt. He's Vice President of External Affairs with Goodwill Industries of Kentucky and a great friend to the Chamber. And so, Devon, I'll turn things over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Iris, and thank you guys for making space for me to be part of this work. Sarah, thank you for committing GLI's resources to lead this work. I think this is extremely important, and so I wanted to commit my time to be part of this work group because I think there's a lot of good that can be done in this space. And so I know you guys have had some opportunities to meet and connect prior to me coming on. And I'm sure there were conversations that have been had, and unfortunately I wasn't privy to those conversations because I wasn't there. But what I will tell you is that I have given a lot of thought about this work that's been posed to us, and not just thought. I want to be really clear in explaining why I believe GLI reached out and asked for my support in helping to guide some of this work. I think mostly it's because, my background, I don't know, maybe for the last decade and a half has been committed in one shape, form, fashion, or another to workforce. And I can, trace that back to the 7 or 8 years that I spent at GLI working as the economic development director there, where so many of the clients that I engaged while I was there at the Chamber had workforce issues. As a matter of fact, it literally, during the time that I was at GLI, was the #1 issue that my business clients had. They had trouble overcoming workforce challenges. And so I got to know workforce from that perspective early on in my career, but then shifted gears to JCPS for 4 years, where I was the assistant superintendent at JCPS. And I like to tell people that I was working on the other side of the workforce equation, preparing talent for the workforce here in Kentucky and Louisville specifically, and really sort of understanding what that entails and how that works and how those pieces are connected. And we started down the path that Dr. Marty Filio and his team are building on now, and that's building employer partnerships at JCPS to connect talent coming out of JCPS to opportunities that existed here in the community. And then from there, and this is just to provide a little background, and I won't go too long into all of this, but I think it's important to understand that from JCPS, I shifted gears and for 6.5 years worked as part of the leadership team for ResCare Workforce Services. And ResCare is the nation's largest workforce services provider. They manage workforce contracts, workforce programs like career centers. As a matter of fact, Kentuckiana Works, Michael Gritton's operation was a client of ours, where we manage the one-stop shop job centers that exist here in Louisville and other places around the country. We manage Job Corps centers and other workforce programs in different communities around the state. And I was I oversaw the external affairs and managing our sales and branding for that organization, and spent a lot of time on the road, traveling the nation, helping communities build, manage, implement, and sustain workforce programs. And so for 6 years, I got to see every workforce program you can imagine, big, small, and everything in between. And then shifted gears recently because I wanted to come home, and as ironically as it sounds, it's probably going to sound a little cheesy, but I spent 6 years on the road traveling and was not home and not engaged in work to improve the community that I've been a part of in years past. And was looking for an opportunity to come back home to be engaged to do work just like this. And so for the last year and a half, I have been working in a role as Vice President of External Affairs at Goodwill Industries of Kentucky, where many people are surprised to learn that Goodwill is not primarily a retail store. I think that's how a lot of people know us. But by and large, Goodwill is actually one of the largest workforce services operators in the state of Kentucky. And our demographic is different than the Michael Grittens of the world. We work with the hardest to serve populations in the state. So those are people who have disabilities, criminal backgrounds, little to no education, addiction histories, you name it, on and on and on. So that's the population of people that we serve, but it's all done with the workforce slant. So I hope that gives you some perspective on what I bring to this conversation and how I'm hoping to lead some of the work that we do. And I know this topic, Sarah, is a big one. God bless you. I know this topic is a big one, and when we talk workforce, it's such a big topic that it has the potential to send us spiraling off into a lot of different areas, and legitimate areas that deserve legitimate attention and time and resources. But I think, quite frankly, chasing some of those workforce rabbits really is a way not to do anything. And what I told Sarah and Iris was that, I wanted us to be really laser focused on one, maybe two things. I think if we get beyond that, we really start losing the ability to do something really substantive and move the needle as it relates to workforce in the African American community here in Louisville. And so I started thinking about all the things that are happening. We've got workforce as it relates to education. Transportation is a workforce issue. Childcare is a workforce issue. Training is a workforce issue, and all these other barriers that prevent people. Criminal backgrounds sometimes become workforce issues, and so all of these, in some way, shape, or form, become part of the workforce discussion. And I think we're fortunate that GLI had the foresight to break up, this work into several work groups. And so you have the criminal justice work group that's being led by David Tandy that's focused on just that. And that, in my opinion, really does boil down to a workforce issue. You've got healthcare. That also contributes to solving workforce problems in this community. Education, Dr. Nat Irving is leading that, and that clearly is part of this workforce challenge that we're overcoming. And Conrad is leading one on talent that focuses on creating sort of an upward pathway for African Americans inside the workforce here in this community. And so we're fortunate that we already have some things building. And so I wanted us to kind of think about, well, where could this group sort of work to fill some of those voids and avoid duplicating some of the efforts that other organizations here in town are tackling themselves. So for instance, you have, as I mentioned, Kentuckiana Works, that's Michael Gritton and his team. They're doing a great job of helping to connect people to training opportunities, to employment opportunities here in town. And so, I didn't want to necessarily duplicate those efforts. The Urban League is doing some great work here in the community, helping people overcome some workforce challenges. Goodwill, for that matter, is part of that space. And then there's other organizations that are also helping to remove some of those barriers that we talked about. And so I started thinking about some conversations that I'd had with folks around the country, and one in particular stands out that I want really to kind of put squarely in the middle of the work that we're proposing for this group. And that's one that I had with some colleagues that I connected with who work for LinkedIn. And I've made some connections with them, and we've had some discussions about this work, about specifically really helping to help communities like ours and the work that we're doing really understand what we're dealing with, right? We talk about challenges in the workforce and removing barriers that help African Americans, specifically as it relates to this work, connect to employment opportunities in our community. So how do we do that? Well, for me, I'll take a half a step back and say that, I've heard on more than one occasion when businesses have been posed with the question, you know, are you hiring? Do you hire African Americans? What's that process look like for you? And so many of those businesses have responded by saying, well, we can't find any. There are none in our pipeline. They don't fit the profile, and on and on and on. These rationales for why they don't hire African Americans or haven't been able to plug certain positions with African Americans. Well, so part of what I've been talking about with the folks at LinkedIn is let's figure out how we overcome that initial challenge. And so I want to pose sort of this concept to this group and really use it as one that I think we might be able to build on to do something really exceptional here in Louisville. And that is kind of creating, think of it, if you will, as an online dating platform for the business community. And so it starts off like this. You work with a LinkedIn and have LinkedIn build a portal, a network specifically for this work that we're doing. And we get African American professionals and people who fall within the working age that we've identified as people who could fill positions in Louisville's workforce. And they essentially help us build a census, if you will, an online census of African American profiles, professionals in this community who upload their resumes, who upload their backgrounds, who upload their credentials, all of those things that go along with building online professional profiles. And we create us a census that says to the business community here in Louisville, we've got, I don't know, I'm throwing a number. We've got 70,000 African-American professionals in this portal, on this census. 45,000 of them have told us they have a college education. And you can just kind of go down and disaggregate the data and break down the profiles of those African-Americans who bring credentials to the workforce. And essentially, have the African-American professionals fill that portal with their information, have businesses in this community who are hiring to identify the talent in that portal and use that portal and use GLI sort of as a convener of that portal and those two worlds to connect those players. And I know it sounds simple, but there's some back end work that would be necessary. There's some marketing and promotional work that'll be necessary to get African Americans to plug their data into these portals. But I think if we can start with that simple premise of identifying the talent, capturing the talent, profiling the talent, and putting that talent on display for businesses in the community to see that they have the opportunity to fill positions in this community with qualified, talented African-American professionals, we start removing the excuse, we start removing the barriers, so to speak, for businesses that claim that they can't find talent. But the other thing that this portal has the ability to do, and I think that's huge right there, quite frankly, I think that gets us an amazing running start on connecting talent to opportunities in this community. Because in so many instances, I've seen amazingly talented people in this community who, in some cases, have come from other places and have decided to leave because Louisville couldn't make the accommodation. The businesses in this community wouldn't make the accommodation. Doors in this community seemed to be closed, and opportunity in this community didn't appear on their front steps like maybe it does in other places. And so I think we help address that issue by making direct connections and bringing those two worlds together. But here's the other thing that I think really becomes important in this space, is that as we get African Americans to fill this census, this portal with their professional profiles, part of what we also do is maybe don't necessarily identify all the professionals who have college degrees, but maybe there are some who have gaps on their profiles, who have criminal backgrounds, who have maybe these other challenges and barriers that prevent them from finding success. And the other thing that we do in this profile is we connect our other partners to it. So let's say you are a 25-year-old African American here in this community, and let's say, I don't know, you spent a year behind bars and it screwed up your work profile, but you want to rebuild that. Well, part of what I think this portal will allow us to do is to plug our community partners into that portal as well. So we don't have to duplicate efforts, but what we do is plug those professionals to resources that exist here in the community, like expungement services. There are organizations like Goodwill, like the Urban League and others who provide expungement services who can help that 25-year-old upcoming professional clean their records and prepare themselves for the workforce. This portal has the potential, based on how we capture data from those who fill this census, so to speak, to plug them based on the gaps that they have and the needs that they have to build their professional profiles, to connect them to real legitimate opportunities and resources in this community that already exist. They don't have to be duplicated. They don't have to be built by someone. They exist. We just plug them in to this portal and connect them to the men and women in this community who need those services. And so that's the concept. And I share that with you guys because, one, I want to get your thoughts on sort of what good you think we might be able to do there, what challenges you think we might have in pulling some of that off, and maybe even how you guys can help bring some of that to fruition. And I ask all of those questions knowing that I'm already having some conversations. I'm already tapped into some folks at LinkedIn, and we're starting these baby steps and building out this concept and thinking about what that would look like, what resources would be necessary. But before I get too far down that pathway with them, I want to get some feedback from this group and have a discussion around this topic with you guys to get a sense of what you think, feel, and how you're reacting to that notion. Any feedback? Surely there's got to be something.
Devon, this is Jackie Pennington.
Hello, Jackie.
I've been in the workforce here in Louisville for a long time. I've retired, but what you're saying is really, really important. There are a lot of people that have basically been cast aside because of a mistake that they made as a youth, and it has haunted them their whole life, and so they have turned to dark ways to make money in order to try to survive. So if we can remove some of those obstacles, those people can come out of the shadows, and I think that's a really good thing. So I think you've come up with some really good ideas. No sense in reinventing the wheel. We all think that's a really good idea, I think.
God, I see Tawana Bain. Thank you, Jackie. I see Tawana Bain just asked a question, and that was, well, where did it go? Oh, there it is. And I'm sorry, I was missing the comments over to the side here. Why LinkedIn versus a Black-owned company already doing this? Super Black leadership here, TKT. The only reason I started with LinkedIn on this, Tawana, was simply because I had a relationship and I had been in conversations with folks about this concept a little while ago, but there's no reason why it has to be them. Quite frankly, if there's talent here locally that can pull that off for us, I am fine with that. I do believe, and I will say this, that based on what we're doing, there's some credibility that LinkedIn brings to something like this with the name brand, name recognition that they have to maybe help us in attracting those local professionals to this notion of uploading data. So many of them already have their data on LinkedIn, and so we can simply pull from there. But I'm not committed to LinkedIn at all. I mean, we can shift gears if that.
Yeah, I think maybe because we do, I think TKT, connects us. I think a lot of major Black companies that have the portal capabilities and are already doing matching for workforce. But what you might do for a LinkedIn is give them an opportunity to support their efforts, but sometimes, we're trying to solve one problem and then we create another. So how do we have an and situation where we're creating more equitable opportunities within the Black community, but we're empowering Black-owned companies that already have the business model and have been doing it prior to what we're experiencing today. Someone like LinkedIn, yes, their brand and their strength and their dollars could really help empower or just provide sustainability in ways, but do they need to lead it? I don't know.
And I don't know either. I'm not going to pretend that I have, the right answer for that. I think the concept is one that we can build on, and the players are ones that we can plug in who fit and make the most sense to us. And so I don't want to make the assumption. I have you guys make the assumption that I'm wholly committed to one vendor doing any of this work. I think for me, it's about getting this concept off the ground and using it in a way that helps us move the needle with this challenge that we're facing. So I hear you, but I hear you loud and clear, Tawana, loud and clear.
Sure.
Devon and Tawana, I would just say I love the and. I think that's brilliant. I think that's the way to rocket this and leverage it and make it unique to our community, but also leverage the power, the bridging power that LinkedIn brings across communities all over the place. And I think this is a great idea. I think we should absolutely pursue it. But I love the and caveat, right? Is the both and. And I mean, I know I've gone to LinkedIn thinking I need to fill a job. I wonder, how can I get LinkedIn to tell me who are the people that are in my network that are diverse? And I can't even quite figure that out. So, so there's a there. There's an underutilized asset that we should capitalize on. I love this idea. Yes, go.
Great. Thank you, Cynthia. I'm looking here. It says, Ashley, are we planning to invite organizations to establish specific workforce goals around this work? Examine and reevaluate policy that creates barriers, nonviolent offenses, felonies, more that XYZ-year-olds. For me, I think part of what we do, and I'm open to hearing feedback from you guys. I don't want to pretend I have all the answers to this, but as I'm thinking about this, part of what I really want us to do is kind of use this as an opportunity, at least the way that I see it, is using it as an opportunity to sort of remove excuses, remove barriers, and to connect employers with job seekers, and then to connect job seekers with resources to help them improve their employability. Those are sort of the two pathways forward in using this tool. But I do believe ultimately it'd be great for us to establish some benchmarks and some goals around how we'd like to see that needle move. But I don't want to pretend that I have those built into my thinking right now. That's something I'd love for you guys to help maybe us think through. Is that the way you're thinking about this, Ashley? I saw you posted this comment and I don't know that I'm answering it correctly.
Yeah, thanks, Devon. So I think one of the barriers I've noticed in some conversations at the SHRM table, the Louisville SHRM table, and then nationally is that people, companies rather, have barriers in place that are dated, that we can do all the work that we're talking about here, but once those people then get to the place where they are ready for employment, their background is pulled, right? A job offer is ready to be extended to that person, but then that can't happen because they have a felony that's 20 years old, or they have a nonviolent offense that creates a barrier within the policy. One place that I think does that, I won't name names, but it's a huge problem. And it's not just a problem that can be changed at the organization level, right? Like Republic Bank, I can go to Steve Trager, I can take it to the board, it can be easily changed. But other companies require a Senate vote or a state statute change. And so that could be years in the making. Right. But then with that, I think we should couple inviting them to examine their attrition rates. What does your applicant pool look like? Mm-hmm. Who is being hired, promoted, transferred, who is being demoted, who is being exited out of the organization and for what reasons. I don't think we could do that work, but at least inviting them to examine that data will help them identify maybe we do have some bias and some barriers that we are unintentionally creating with our policies in place. And that is where the systemic work will start to begin to change for our city, is reducing and eliminating those barriers that 10, 20, 30, 40 years old.
Yeah. You know, Iris, I'm wondering if the work that Conrad and his group are doing kind of feeds into this. I won't pretend that I've gotten in the weeds with some of that work, but it sounds like you know, they're asking businesses to make some commitments to this work that probably lends itself to what Ashley's talking about. Am I too far off base on that?
So, Dawn, it's a couple different things. I will say big picture, what Conrad's work is dedicated is about workplace culture. It could be about hiring practices, but it's really big picture of what we can do to ensure that we have an inclusive workplace culture within companies, and then also for, you know, increased awareness. Regarding what Ashley is describing about, you know, workforce barriers, regarding, you know, background checks, criminal records, you know, anything that would prevent maybe an application from even being considered, or, you know, background check removing you from the consideration process. You know, GLI has tried to approach it twofold. One, it's public policy, right? And so we've been adamant about increased access to expungement. So, you know, lowering the fees, reducing the wait times, you name it, expanding expungement period. That work, we still have an uphill battle. There's a lot more that needs to be done to increase access so individuals, you know, can expunge their records. And so that's one effort that is ongoing. Another thing too, though, and I like the way that Ashley described it, it's about modernizing hiring practices. You know, telling employers, I think some employers, I think, are going to be more receptive, and their workplaces will be, I think, primed to reimagine how they consider candidates and the hiring practices. And so, you know, how they utilize background checks, for instance, you know, how they do those types of screenings. And so it's a matter of inviting and enticing employers that, you know, could you be a second chance employer? I'll give you a good example of some recent legislation that we championed. Was specific to individuals that failed drug tests. So what can Kentucky employers do to be more forgiving and provide resources, wraparound support, those types of second chances to those suffering from addiction without losing their job? You know, how can they get on the right path, maintain their paycheck, you know, employer-sponsored health insurance, and really get the legitimate second chance? How can we expand that to those that have, you know, interacted with the justice system? So those concepts, we're building some momentum there, but it's that public policy piece plus what are we doing to train and to entice and encourage HR professionals and small to mid-sized companies, particularly, to modernize their hiring practices. And those are conversations that we're hosting all the time to change the minds, change the way that we practice hiring protocols, because, you know, a lot of individuals are unfortunately sidelined, right? And, you know, and there's like economic impact when that happens. And so as a chamber, we're having those conversations, big picture and little picture, but the feedback that we received today will help inform how we move forward.
You guys forgive me, I got kicked off for half a second there, but I think I caught most of what you said there, Iris. So it sounds like good. I mean, rest care is, I mean, well, I'm all over the place. Goodwill, rest care, GLI is already tackling some of that to a certain degree, some of the work that Ashley's asked. And I think that's important because you're right, Ashley, there are barriers once people sort of submit that application. And I literally had someone that I was mentoring, and she was doing some work for me, and she got hired by a local company. And in the middle of the hiring process, they find out that she had a simple offense years ago, but they retracted the offer. And it just seemed like a real archaic type of approach to managing job opportunities. And so I'm hoping that needle changes. Can you guys, I don't, everybody on my screen is frozen, so I don't know if you guys can hear me. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, all right. So a few of you all are moving, but for some reason, a lot of you all are frozen. So I don't know what that's about, but I'm trusting that you guys
We're
can hear me.
listening intently, Devon.
Very good, very good, very good. So again, I kind of go back what Tawana said. I don't feel like we have to be exclusively focused on LinkedIn for this work, but I do suggest that, in doing this work, we attempt maybe even to do some benchmarking and at least get a sense of maybe. And I don't know other communities that are doing what I'm proposing right now, but I do know some that have kind of created their own sort of census of certain populations, professional populations in their communities. And I'd love to maybe do some benchmarking with other communities so we can get a sense of really kind of where Louisville stands in its with this African-American professional population and how they are being connected to opportunities. And then, we start this process of tracking this data now, 5-10 years from now, we get the opportunity to really start to see whether or not we've moved the needle, whether or not those people in that portal have been connected to job opportunities. Have they been promoted on the jobs that they're in? Or have they left the community? Have they tapped out and just kind of walked away from the workforce for one reason or another? I think we'll really get a chance to see whether or not we're improving or whether or not things in this community are improving and doing what we can through this simple course of technology to make connections in a way that simplifies the process for everyone.
Devon, just a quick question for some of the programming that you all are offering, because some of the work that you do is really geared around this. Have you all contemplated any offering of job boards from the Goodwill perspective of really getting to those candidates and tying them to potential employers for those opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, so for this particular concept, Kelly, that's exactly the way I think this thing has to work. So, obviously you've got to do a couple of things. One, you've got to start with creating sort of a census of the Black professional population here in Louisville. So you get people to fill this portal with their professional credentials, their resumes, whatever. But then it's only effective if we also get local employers, particularly maybe starting with those who do a significant amount of hiring, to connect to that portal and start to help us with the process of matching the talent with the opportunity. And then I think ultimately, you're right, we do have to start connecting job boards to that to simplify the process. Part of what I want to be able to do is make sure that, if nothing else, we can start either tracking connections that are being made through this portal, or doing sort of our own census, if you will, maybe once every 6 months, where we poll everyone in this portal, everyone who has a profile in this portal, and ask them about sort of their professional standing. Have you gotten a job in the last 6 months? Have you been promoted? Have you been hired? Have you been fired? Whatever the case might be, but allows us over time to really start tracking that population. But I think we also need to do something similar to that with the employers that are connected to this, to also get a sense of whether or not they are finding talent in this portal, whether or not what they say is true. Maybe there's not, 45 Black molecular scientists in Louisville, and they have to go search somewhere else to find those types of employees. And so, if we can start asking them to provide us some feedback so we can understand where the gaps exist, I think that gives us a real legitimate opportunity to figure out where the work needs to be done. Let's see. My friend Debbie Burdoff, good to see you. Haven't seen you in a long time. It's good to see your face. Give me your feedback, Debbie. What are you thinking? I'd love to get your 2 cents on all of this.
I think you're right on. Just getting the dots connected, all the points connected, getting the people into the system. But I've always felt like, childcare is an issue as a working mom, with a support system. I can't imagine what it would look like, to be single. Transportation. My husband works for UPS. And so I hear about that. I'm certainly not representing them in that comment, but I do think that there's jobs out there. And, my concern is getting the people into the database and, and getting everybody connected. There is some, and I don't know what it's called. Kathy Deiska had shared with me that it was a resource type program that, that, and because we come across people with real estate, that are need support, that are in maybe, negative situations and potentially having to sell their home because of that. And so, but I can't remember what it's called, but she had a card. And, and I was sitting here thinking, is that something? Because there was resources there, and, and this could, potentially fit into this program somehow.
Debbie?
Yeah, I think we're going to need all of that. I really do. I mean, I think, you get people who plug their profiles into this portal, but say, it's difficult for me to find and keep a job because I can't find childcare. Well, I think there are local organizations that have resources and the ability to kind of help with those challenges. And we've got to figure out what they are and plug them into this so that we can not only connect those job seekers to job opportunities, but to connect them the resources that remove the barriers that prevent them from pursuing those job opportunities. Stacy, I think you were going to say something. I'm sorry.
No worries. I was going to say, Debbie, it might be Louis Connect.
It is.
Okay, she partnered with Metro United Way, and you can either get it on an app or you can go through the internet, and it gives you, it's a community-based kind of resource directory, and it's especially targeted for youth that we serve at Boys and Girls Haven that are committed to state's care, and then maybe have gone to Kathy's housing programs to get them secured with natural supports. But that was a really good idea. That may be a good fit for this, to get the momentum started. So.
Yeah, and so I saw a post here in the comment section that said GLI actually asked employers to post their positions on their job board. So, I mean, we clearly have a running start with some of this. So we're not starting from scratch. I do think, the heaviest lift on the front of this is really going to be to get enough African Americans to fill this portal with information in order to make it worthwhile. And so in my mind, I kind of see this really kind of heavy front end, I'll call it a marketing campaign for lack of a better phrase right now, but to really, challenge people and ask them to consider uploading, their profiles in one more place, right? They've got them all over the place, many of them do, but to help us build this census and really start to help them understand that we want to make a case for building connections for African Americans in this community. And here's sort of the ground zero for that work, and get them to commit to uploading their information. And then, I think part of building that out means identifying some early success stories where maybe someone is connected to a job, and we share that in a way that I ask that inspires someone else to go post their job, their profile there, so that they might be the next person connected to a job opportunity. So I think that's where the heaviest lift is. I'm not at all going to pretend that I'm a programmer and understand how to do the technical aspect of this work, but I've been told that it can be done, and I trust that we've got some talent here locally that can help us with that. Tawana's going to help me find them, right?
Devon, hi, this is Christine Tarquinio with GLI. I oversee Live and Lou, which is our talent attraction, retention, and development initiative. And I just wanted to pop in and say that we are currently piloting a program with LinkedIn called Talent Insights that will allow us to help small and medium-sized companies more accurately identify and directly contact talent. We are not at this point able to separate out demographic information. They don't provide that yet, but I've reached out to our rep to see if there's a way that we could possibly use what we're already doing to create some of this work.
Yeah, I mean, if it already exists, no need for us to rebuild it. I'm not suggesting that we've got to do any of that. I'm looking for solutions. I'm not looking for the task of building something for the sake of doing it. So if it already exists, Christine, yeah, let's plug into it. Let's figure out if that's the platform that we can use. It may be just what we need.
Sounds good. If anybody has any questions about looking for particular types of talent or any talent that you're finding is difficult to identify and hire, you can reach out to me. I'll put my contact information in the chat, and I can take you through the tool and show you what we're working on.
Okay.
Devon, can I make one more comment?
Yeah, please.
Okay, yeah, and I'm an idea person. Logistics sometimes, you know, are or somebody else's job, but you know, it's like when we talk about a UPS or an Amazon, you know, where they have all these job openings and
Right.
and are struggling for people. I wish there was a way that there was someone who could orchestrate fitting those two jobs together, so that it could be a full-time job that would pay the rent, pay the mortgage. I mean, you go work at a UPS and you can get phenomenal benefits, you know, after a year or so. But it's a 20-hour job.
Yeah.
You know, so, and it's not putting two jobs together where people work all the time and don't sleep. It is logistically bringing two companies, you know, of whoever together, that these people can, both companies have their needs met, and the individual makes a job, you know, makes a living for themselves. And then they have great health insurance and, you know, everything else that comes along with that. And, you know, opportunity.
Debbie, I will tell you when I did work at GLI, that was not in the same way, but I can tell you that they have the ability to facilitate that. When I worked there, there were a lot of seasonal logistical jobs in this community, and part of what we were able to do was kind of figure out the cycle of those businesses, and so we could connect job seekers to one company that was going to work, you know, the first half of the year, and then they transitioned to the other company the second half of the year. And it was really just about knowing what those cycles were and being able to, you know, make some connections there. I think that's work that GLI really can help facilitate, and we can use, you know, maybe to kind of share information like that in a portal where those job opportunities might exist for people. Because you're right, a lot of these are going to be entry-level jobs or part-time jobs for people that you know, on their own won't be sufficient, but maybe could be used as on-ramps to building a career, or, you know, supplementing income, those sort of things. I see a comment from Lance here. Is that your point about a heavy lift early on to get the right people in the portal? We need to make sure there's a process and manpower to keep the portal full on an ongoing basis. I absolutely agree. This doesn't work if we don't have talent in the pipeline. I mean, if there's no talent in the pipeline, we might as well walk away. And so it's a heavy lift on the front end. I think it gets lighter after you begin to populate it and you have some success stories, but it is absolutely not something you walk away from ultimately, because if this portal is to be successful, it can only be successful if the businesses in this community can go to it and find the talent that they claim is inaccessible right now.
I think there are still many businesses that have some of those barriers in place that would prevent them from even utilizing some of the resources we're talking about, like their background checks. And in my notes earlier, I had just said, I think we could provide some resources for consideration to, even if we start with just GLI members and then roll it out more broadly, depending on how that goes, for new policies on things like the background check, right? There may be some positions in an organization that can't allow certain backgrounds or records, especially depending on timing for those convictions. And so I would really like for us to look at options for how we can provide some of those resources, because speaking from someone who's connected to every HR resource we can get to, there aren't good resources out there in those systems, that we do have to create them ourselves and make those available.
Okay. Okay. I'm hearing that as a problem for us. I've heard it. That's the third time now I think it's come up in this conversation. So let's flag that, Iris, as something to build on, and connect this work to what GLI is already doing. Again, I know you guys are moving the needle in that regard, and in some other avenues in Frankfurt and other places where you're doing that work, but maybe there's the ability for us to connect sort of this work that we're talking about right now to resources that are provided for businesses that help them remove those hiring barriers that prevent them from receiving people who might fill this database of ours.
And for the folks at GLI, I'd be happy to facilitate some of that.
Devon, this is Sarah. I'd like to go back to your comment about GLI having the capability and the background in kind of convening employers that do seasonal employment and basically creating like one full-time job out of two part-time jobs. One of the things that we talked about at length in our last work stream meeting is our Career Acceleration Network, which we're currently fundraising around, and we have 12 committed partners to. Basically, the concept is that we take people who are low skill, low pay employees and move them up through a pipeline to where they're at a destination employer where it's high pay, high skill, and we do it by cohorting employees or employers, so that if a person is at a low skill job that doesn't, pay or doesn't have 40 hours a week, they can move into the next phase through commitments of tenure on the part of the employees and commitments of training on the part of the employers, move into that next phase of employment. It's basically a 2-year pilot program. And like I said, we've got about a third of the money that we need to completely launch it. We're hiring people to do it. So I just want to mention that that's also underway. And we talked about it a little bit in our last work stream meeting, but I know you didn't get to be with us then, but we're happy that you are leading us now. So appreciate all you're doing.
Very good. Very good. Very good. Chad says we could develop a virtual job fair with also must make rewarding for companies to stop the practices of limiting employment opportunities by background check. So yeah, so there we go. So right, virtual job, job fair. I mean, so the possibilities at that point, once you kind of build the online platform, become endless. I love the idea of the online job fairs. So many other ways that we can go about doing this. Obviously, COVID, it creates the ability to do this and the need to do this, at least virtually, to begin with. But ultimately, there's nothing that says that we can't do some of this in person once we're back to some sense of normalcy in our world, to do more to connect those populations. I know some of that's working, but I mean, already it's happened in the past. But I want to build some, really work to build some branding around some of this, and work to sort of really establish this as an effort in this community to connect African Americans to real employment opportunities, and to really sort of embrace GLI's committed itself to counsel in racism. I know that's a huge undertaking, and I think you got to have lofty goals. That clearly is one, and I think one of the ways that we can help do that is by removing the barriers that exist for companies to hire people who they don't traditionally hire. And I think this gets us one step further down the pathway to making that happen. And then it also, again, I just want to keep reiterating this so we don't lose sight on this, but it also really also allows us to kind of plug in other partners, other resources, opportunities to connect these the African Americans who are uploading information into this portal, who may have deficiencies in their profiles. It allows us to connect them to real world, real legitimate opportunities and resources here in this community without us having to reinvent any wheels. We don't have to create anything. We support the companies and organizations that are already doing the work. We just use GLI for one of the things that it is absolutely great at doing, and that's serving as a convener. bringing those worlds together, facilitating those transactions, and then sort of tracking the metrics on the back end. So, I think, conceptually, we have something that I think might be able to work, and potentially even maybe have some a model that might already be established that we can patch into. I think part of sort of the next step for this process for me would be, Iris, to kind of pursue some of those discussions to determine, how we make this work, whether or not we are in the process of attempting to reinvent a wheel that literally already exists, or if there's one that already exists for us, and then maybe having a discussion around, how we use that, how we build that out, as maybe our next point of discussion. Does that make sense?
Yes, Devon, I think we got a lot of strong feedback today, really good ideas, and good participation from partners that have subject matter expertise in this area. So we have a seed of a concept, right? How GLI can help connect strategic connections to those that want the job, and to encourage HR professionals and employers to go seek, right? And so that connection piece. And so we have that concept locked in. There seems to be some consensus that that is a need, that is of interest. Folks are interested in the data and how we can, properly assess what we're trying to achieve. I think next steps, Devon, is what we'll do is we'll reach out to all of our partners that have similar work in this area to take a bit of an inventory of who's doing what already exists, and how can we connect the dots, right? Like that's sort of the recurring theme, is that the misconnections. How can we be strategic about individuals and real job opportunities? And so, leveraging our relationships and our assets and what's already in existence, and then GLI just sort of playing QB to put all of this together. And so we have the seeds of the concept. So thank everyone for your feedback today. So staff will work with Devon and others to see how we can develop some actionable steps to achieving something that's a bit more strategic, that can meet people and job opportunities.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And look at that, right at 11:29. That's perfect timing, Ralph. You see how that works? Well, so Iris, the one thing that I will ask next, again, obviously I'm sort of the newest person to this work group and this work stream. Are we proposing to meet monthly, or how often and regular are we scheduling these meetings? Are they being done on an as-need basis? Because obviously, there's going to be some work necessary before it needs to happen before we get back together, and I don't want to schedule a meeting unnecessarily before then if we don't need to or have to.
Devon, Steph, we have our homework, and so do you. So we'll get to work on trying to map out some homework and some work that we need to do on the back end to kind of support a forward motion here. I think it's fine that we can discuss maybe aiming for January to reconvene the group to do a report out and to essentially divvy up some of the tasks that we'll need help with. And so, yeah, we just try to assess these meetings on an as-needed basis. So be on the lookout for some notice.
Sounds like a winner to me. Well, I'll be working behind the scenes until then. Well, thank you guys for allowing me to jump in and be part of this work. I really do think we have the ability to do something exceptional here in Louisville with this, and be a model for other communities. I don't believe that it's not going to happen without a stumble or two along the way, but I'm convinced that we can do something unique and special here that helps address this problem that we're trying to confront. So thank you guys, and I hope you have a great Tuesday.